Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Divided Films, the podcast where we talk about movies that audiences and critics do not agree on. My name is JJ, and with me, as per usual, is my co-host Keith.
Hello!
And today we're going to go back to a more recent film. Keith and I, we've been talking about some older movies lately. We kind of dove into the 80s there for a couple weeks. But, with the Oscars approaching, we figured, we should maybe see which of those movies, if any, are divided. And sure enough, there's at least one, at least the first one that I thought would be divided. And that's the movie we're talking about today, which is Don't Look Up, directed by Adam McKay and starring an ensemble cast that includes Leonardo DiCaprio, Meryl Streep, Jennifer Lawrence, and the critics' consensus, I should say too, that this movie falls into the category of having a negative score with critics and a positive score with audiences. So on Rotten Tomatoes, only 55% of critics approved, but 78% of audiences approved. And the critics' consensus: Don't Look Up aims too high for its scattershot barbs to consistently land, but Adam McKay's star-studded satire hits its target of collective denial square on. Now, there's also an audience consensus, which reads, although it can be heavy-handed with its messaging, Don't Look Up tackles important subjects with humor and heart. Off the bat, I definitely agree more with the critics' consensus than the audience consensus. I don't know how much heart this movie has. At least maybe at the end, there's a little more sentiment. The only thing really with the audience consensus I initially am going to is heavy-handed. This is a satire, and ever since The Big Short, Adam McKay has gone from wacky comedies with Will Ferrell to now more of these satires that are more elevated in different kinds of ways. Yeah, they're a little more prestige. He's definitely tackling he's definitely going for more nuance ever since The Big Short. And I think this movie is kind of the epitome of that. He's got this big star-studded cast with a bunch of Oscar winners. He is really tackling big issues here and trying to make a statement about who we are in this state of social media, politics, culture. And it's kind of a hit and miss movie for me, because I do think it's on point what he's saying about who we are in this film, but I kind of already knew that. What he's saying in this movie is what I already knew, is what I'll start off with. There's nothing really, I'm not really getting a fresh perspective here. But what about you, Keith? What was your initial reaction to Don't Look Up?
It's kind of amazing that this movie is longer than 2001: Space Odyssey. It's a satire, and it's longer than
that
a movie
epics
that some consider. Yeah, it's like an epic satire. We talked about Adam McKay before, and yeah, you're right. I can go back to his goofy comedies many times, and he's kind of making like high octane documentaries. Like I think with he puts his own spin on it, like The Big Short. I think he made it so visually interesting and a creative way to tell it that I think he deserved the best adapted screenplay for making a story about that. And this, I think he tries to have the best of both worlds with this, like trying to make a high end satire while also trying to have its goofy elements too. I was kind of even more so with the critics, or even like extending beyond. It kind of reminded me of like an SNL sketch that went a little 2.5 hours long. And when you recommended it, when I finished it, I said to myself, I really don't see myself watching this again.
I agree. I think this was a one-time viewing. Personally, I'm not one to go back to apocalyptic movies very often unless they are so zany like Armageddon. But something like this, or going way back to say like Deep Impact, I personally don't enjoy watching the world end. I find it to be very stressful and sad, even if it is played in an absurd satirical way. And I do think there is some intended anxiety meant to be elicited in this movie, especially with Jennifer Lawrence's diet app countdown and the botched attempts to exploit or stop the meteor or comet that's heading towards Earth. I do think that I was feeling a lot of things that was intended, but I feel like in terms of the satire, it's very predictable, and it's something that almost anyone could think to say or depict about how we as a self-absorbed culture and an apathetic culture, a cynical culture, would respond to a world-ending event. You know, denial, conspiracy theory, political divide, capitalist opportunity, and ultimate just demise. And sure, that's all believable, but I just wish there was a little more of a fresh take on it.
Well, it definitely needed more drafts. I think like there are times during watching this going, like that could be cut. No offense to Ariana Grande, but her scene in the beginning was funny, and then when she was singing, I was like, why?
Yeah, I guess that was supposed to be kind of funny because she's basically singing about how everyone's about to die, right? I mean, I kind of saw the intent behind that sequence when she's at the concert and everyone is really into it as if it's any other concert, but she's literally singing like, we're all about to die, this is the end, it's going to be horrible. Like I kind of got the irony there, but
no,
it wasn't really necessary.
I get that. It's just like they sing the whole song, and
yeah,
like,
it went on too long. That could have been a snippet.
He's trying to tackle so many how many institutions would go at it, like how and you have the entertainment side, you have government, you have tech, and then you have media, and he's trying to do so much, and then you're throwing even more on it. I heard Matthew Perry was cut from this movie. I'm like, what was Matthew Perry going to do in this movie? If you have a Tucker Carlson character in Michael Chiklis, and Michael Chiklis only got like less than 30 seconds of screen time, I'm like, you could do something with that. I kind of want to see more of that.
I get that too, because you see a little bit of the conservative pundits who are being just straight up dicks about the whole thing. But yeah, that was a bit underexplored, and we spent maybe a little too much time with the Tyler Perry and Kate Blanchett news anchors, the Daily Rip, I think their show was called. And I kept thinking, like, why does he keep going back on this one show? I would maybe expect him to go on like the late night circuits, go on other news shows, maybe the morning show circuit. You know what I mean? Like maybe explore all those different aspects about how all those different genres would mishandle talking about how it's the end of the world. That would be a little more interesting, but he keeps going back to this one show, and I found that to be a little tiring and repetitive.
Yeah, like I remember reading the brief synopsis when this film got announced, and it was like two scientists go on a meteor tour to try to learn to try to tell the world that a meteor is going to hit. And I was like, yeah, they don't really go on a media tour. Like and when the plot actually like gets going, like when they started the Don't Look Up campaign, I paused it and there was still like an hour left. And I said, and I didn't care.
Exactly. We were an hour 40 at that point. And I even forgot that was even the title of the movie, Don't Look Up. It's like, oh, okay, that's the social campaign of it all. But at that point, I was kind of thinking we were going to go into the end. I'm like, oh, no, wait, this is like a whole nother chapter of this very long saga. And, I'm like, let's just get on with it at that point. It was, I think they had already established all the points they were trying to make at that point. But now we're going to go on a little longer with these campaigns.
And it's amazing. it's amazing that like he's done really good satire before with like The Big Short has 4 stories going on. I don't know why. Leo's great. Jennifer Lawrence, they're all great, and I actually kind of got annoyed by Meryl Streep and Jonah Hill.
Me too.
It got straw man-y for me. It got like too cartoony to be satirical. But you could have split this story up into like maybe Leo was like sharing the lead with other, like maybe a reporter could have been the main character. Maybe a congresswoman or something. Like it's like we could have had 4 leads from different aspects of society all trying to do their own thing.
Right, that's a good point, because The Big Short is structured that way, where you have 4 loosely connected stories that all revolve around the same event, but a lot of those characters never even interact with each other. You're seeing just different groups of people handling the situation in their own way. Here, yeah, that would have been interesting to see that. You have the political world, you have the scientific world, you have the media world, but maybe they are only interacting here and there. Like Jonah Hill and Meryl Streep, they deliver what is expected of them. Jonah Hill playing another obnoxious jackass character, delivering the same kind of lines, and they were on too many times. They just kept doing the same shtick over and over again. It's like, I get it. I get that they're the problem, and they delivered the same joke over and over again about how he's the chief of staff, but also the son of the president, which I thought was a joke at first. Like they just kidded around, but it's like, no, he actually is the son of the president and the chief of staff, which is kind of weird. I know it's a satire, but even in this heightened world, I'm like, that I don't think would happen. She even, as a president, she was like insane. She also was appointing a porno star sheriff as a chief justice or as a Supreme Court justice. That was a weird plot point for me. Like, why is she so actively insane, this president? I would have maybe bought if she was like a more conventional president. That would have been maybe a little more effective if she comes off as making like your typical blunders and your typical run-of-the-mill president. And that's how any president would respond, is as if the end of the world is just another piece of their agenda.
Well, you're trying to outdo Trump. You're trying to out insane Trump, and it just comes off looking, and I don't want to hear any like idiocracy comparisons, because this is a satire on how our society would handle it. It got way too cartoony, where she had a back tattoo. And she's doing all these like she's female sexting Trump, and I'm like, no, like let's. It got too hyperbolic or too exaggerated and funny. I like it when Jonah Hill played that character in This Is the End. I found out but there are some scenes that just went on too long, and you could see them improvising a little bit. Not that I'm against it completely, but you could see them just like quote unquote winging it, and I'm like, cut this. This movie, we're at like an hour 50 already.
Yeah, because most of the characters are pretty grating on purpose, but you keep getting the same sort of, there's no more dimension to them than that. Even like the hosts, Kate Blanchett and Tyler Perry, keep going back to that show, and we get it. They're these annoying hosts who make these terrible jokes and are basically fighting for airtime to talk over each other. But that's established the first time they go there, and again, I would have liked to see them explore other aspects of like the media world there. They didn't really, those two characters were not like a reflection of the whole industry. They're just one very specific part. So I thought that was a missed opportunity.
Dr. Mindy is a tenured professor of astronomy at Michigan State.
I'm sorry, did you say Michigan State?
Exactly. They have an excellent astronomy department.
You say so.
You want to see my SAT scores?
I'm sorry, who is she?
Are you her son?
I'm chief of staff boy with the dragon tattoo, so I'm doing fine.
How many tampons can you fit in that bag?
As many as I want.
At this very moment, I say we sit tight and assess.
Sit tight and assess. Sit tight and assess?
You want us to sit tight.
And then assess.
I felt like I was in the wrong, or like I had to step back a second, because even when I watched it the first time, I was reading all the reviews and Reddits, all the audience reviews, and I'm just like, am I missing something? Like, because there are people that really enjoyed it, and then when I actually started talking to people who have seen it, and I saw this a lot in the audience reviews. There are people out there who like it, but even the positive reviews are like, I like it even though I know it's this, or I like it, but like I was talking to a friend today and I said, it was, shout out to Johnny Del Luna. I was talking to him and he's like, oh, what movie are you guys doing? I said, Don't Look Up. And he's like, I liked it, even though it was a little bit heavy-handed. And this is unprompted by me. So I'm like, it does sound like a movie that I just I don't see how. And this is with much love from Adam McKay. Like, I don't see how I can go back to this. It does seem like it's trying to be a little too clever.
Yeah, it's trying hard. It's just trying very, very hard. And I get that too with liking it, but like it's almost as if positive score, but with an asterisks. It's like, well, there are these, we have notes, even though we liked it fine. Like, I agree. I liked it fine. I like it mostly for the performances of the lead two characters. I find Jennifer Lawrence to be pretty compelling in this as someone losing her mind. She's like the one sane person, really. And like Leonardo DiCaprio's character too, I kind of like his arc of how he does get kind of suckered in by the glamour of being like, oh, like the sexy scientist, and then he eventually also loses his mind. So I thought they had some good arcs and all, but it was just frustrating because you don't really you're watching this struggle, and it's it's in a satire. You're not going to have like a happy ending or anything, but they made the characters who do win, the characters who escape and go off into another planet, they were like, we kind of get a hinted comeuppance, but not a satisfying one. Like what the Steve Jobs type character, like what was the character's name? It was like I'm gonna look it up. Hold on. Peter Isherwell, and that performance was interesting. He was playing this very scary hybrid character of like a Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs, and I don't know. I guess he was like the most powerful character in the movie. I guess this movie is suggesting that like these billionaire CEOs are more powerful than, say, the president, which is like probably true. But even like he has the president whipped in the one scene where he's like yelling at her and stuff like that. He was so egomaniacal that it was forcing the point, and I was not enjoying that satire. I was just put off by the performance.
Yeah, it's funny because like Adam McKay and the person who David Sirota, like they're both like left leaning but anti-establishment. That's where their policies lie. So I'm like getting, you're obviously getting like Bezos, Musk vibes from him, but I kept saying to myself, and Mark Rylance is an amazing actor. This movie didn't need like a comic book cartoon villain.
He was a villain. Like he was the bad guy. I mean, it's his fault. Like he stops the mission that would have saved the world because he's like, no, we can make money.
But you could even attempt to do that. There's so many angles that you could go with this kind of story. But in terms of the many, like this is us versus ourselves. This is us versus nature. This is us versus institutions. Us, like bureaucracy is kind of the main
versus society.
Like I don't think this movie needed. You could have a character like this in this movie. Maybe not him be so. Like, you're going to die by a whatever alien. I don't know what that is. And then, the payoff was like, that was weird. I'm out. Especially the post-credit scene, which completely confirms my Saturday morning cartoonness of it all.
Well, yeah, because he's like, the Isherwell character, he establishes that they have algorithms that can predict how you die. But, okay, maybe how you would die naturally if, say, you're prone to heart disease or whatever. But no, his algorithm can predict the future, because in the mid-credit scene, like we're saying, the Meryl Streep character, the president, gets killed by like an alien bird on whatever alien planet they land on, and his algorithm was able to predict that. How? You're like these algorithms can like predict the future, but they also cannot predict that their plan to mine this comet would fail and lead into the destruction of the human race. Like that, like was. I guess that's like a nitpick, but at the same time, like that joke doesn't really add up or make any sense.
A lot of my like, usually with a movie like this, I'm going like, oh, maybe I would have done this, and I mean, I want to say like, wouldn't it have been better if they just got like stranded out in space?
Yeah, that would have been better. I mean, I guess at the end, the hint is they're all about to be hunted down by these ostrich alien creatures. Sure,
but yeah, my main criticisms with this movie are like not like, I actually didn't mind the ending. I think it like, I know some people who even like the movie didn't care for the ending, but I'm like, that's the point that he's trying to make. But I thought like, outside of it being heavy-handed, I thought the humor was too broad and too, when it thought it was being clever, it was actually being lazy and turning people into straw mans where it should have been. I don't know. After watching like Veep all last year, like I would have loved it if like Armando Iannucci tackled something like this, where everyone is a little bit stupid. Everyone's trying to do bureaucracy. Everyone's trying to, like, bureaucracy keeps getting in the way of us trying to stop this. But it was just also too long. Like
No. Well, one thing I liked, but then started getting on my nerves, is how this movie has a lot of kind of like in between scenes. So like in an older apocalyptic movie, like in A Day After Tomorrow or something, you don't see the scientists waiting in the lobby of the White House to talk to the president. You just cut to them talking to the president. Like, this movie has a lot of those scenes before the action where the characters are reflecting and talking about what's going to happen, or trying to wrap their brains around all the insanity. And I kind of like that a little bit in the beginning, but they were doing that so much that it's like, all right, I already know how they feel. You already established that. We don't need to keep going back to that. It's something they dwelled on a little too much. And in terms of this movie thinking it's clever, there were also some visual things that I caught that were like, okay, like, I get it. For example, there's a shot of Meryl Streep smoking in front of a tank that says flammable. And there's like a lot of stuff like that too, where the movie is like, ooh, like, did you catch that? It's like, yes, I caught that. Very nice. But like, what are you trying to say? Like, she's an idiot? Like, okay, I got that already.
I just, like, I've seen people in comments go like, but this is how we would react to this. And I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's
to a degree. I mean, like, there's some, I get that there would be like people denying, like, oh, the comment's a conspiracy. I get that people would, like to pretend that it wasn't happening, and they would still be more interested, and maybe it's just as a distraction, be interested more in celebrity gossip or whatever else, to a degree.
But the idea of, I don't know, I just couldn't even buy the don't looking up aspect of it, or just like, I don't mind the mess, of like information getting messy. I actually agree with that, and I think it would make things. I mean, look at the world today; it's making things complicated. Something that's so basic as like an asteroid about to hit the Earth. Don't look up. I don't know. It just went to so I unbelievable lengths in terms of like. I'm still gonna think back to like a Saturday morning cartoon when it should be hard hitting satire, which is what he's done. He's done it before. Even in the other guys, it ends with such a great satirical note that always sticks with me. So that's why it's more of like a disappointment where where you want to take our anxieties over climate change, and also I think now COVID I think that was thrown into the mix as well. I just feel like it was first draft rushed out.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I mean, you were mentioning before, too, about how Adam McKay has a very clear political stance. You know, he's anti-authoritarian, but he's also left-leaning. You definitely get a sense of that, too, where not only does he like to really admonish people on the right, but he also likes to admonish people in the middle. Like, there was the one joke where I think it was it Chris Evans?
I like that. I like that.
That was
coming from his perspective. That made me laugh, like up and down, like
he had the up and down, but that seemed to be a shot at people who are trying to bring people together. You know, and again, like sometimes it can be articulated in nonsensical ways, but that was a real hit on like, no, like we are right and they are wrong, and you shouldn't compromise or come together. It's like, okay, and like in the event of an asteroid about to hit the Earth, sure, yeah, that's definitely true. But you know, in terms of, I don't know, more like it's a little too angry for me to totally on board with, to like admonish even people who just want everyone to get along.
I don't have a problem. I mean, as someone who likes to write, I have no problem like putting your anger on the screen, even like however you feel about someone, a creator's politics. I thought that was a pretty good joke, and like I think for me it's just I feel like we're past and you know, at me, even though I'm not on Twitter, at me if you disagree, but I feel like there's a lot of people, or in 2022 we're past the point of believing whether climate change is real or not, and just kind of, I think we just disagree on the solutions to it. And I think that, I don't know, I think if you focused more on that, it would have been on board, as opposed to like not looking up or down. Even though I like the Chris Evans jokes, it was just well,
that was too literal, right? Like literally, do not look up. The government wants you to look down, like as if the government wants you to bury your head in the sand. That was very, again, on the nose, heavy-handed. Like they are actually not looking up at the sky, and the first guy who does look up at the sky is like, oh crap, it is right there. All I had to do was look up, literally look up into the sky to see that there actually was a comet about to kill us all. And again, that's so literal that I wish they came up with something a little more clever.
Okay.
Well, it's just something we do around here. You know, we just keep the bad news light.
Right. It helps the medicine go down. And speaking of medicine, tomorrow we've got a
Well,
two-part...
maybe the destruction of the entire planet isn't supposed to be fun. Maybe it's supposed to be terrifying and unsettling.
Please don't do that.
And you should stay up all night, every night, crying. When we're all 100% for sure gonna fucking die!
Like, you know, when it comes to like satires that I do enjoy, you know, I think back and like take a movie like Network that really dissects media. And maybe that one works a little better too, because it's a little more focused, not trying to tackle everything, just media. But that movie starts off very grounded in how things worked at the time, and then progressively gets more absurd as it goes along. But then by the end, it takes you right back to a more normal reaction to something. And I feel like that really works, because it shows you the slower transition into what's possible when the slippery slope into insanity. Where this one, it's like you're diving headfirst into the pool of insanity, and you're just like left with this big rush and shock of like, whoa, like it was so drastic of a change that I find that distracting, and it takes away from the messages they're trying to get across.
I think one movie that it's been compared to the most has been Dr. Strangelove. And
yeah, I got that, especially with the screaming. There's a lot of yelling that I feel like was trying to tap into Dr. Strangelove.
Well, I mean, The difference is, though, with Doctor Strangelove and what makes Doctor Strangelove work is, like, look, you're not going to have the creative characters of Peter Sellers. You're not going to have Doctor Strangelove. And I probably would not have liked a character like that in this movie, but I'm not putting all my chips into even that sentence. And it would have to be done really right. But I don't think for this movie it would have worked. But it's also divided into 3 stories, and it has even like a prologue of the plane. And, it's, yeah, you got the military, you got the boardroom, and you got what's going on the plane. It's kind of focused in its satire of nuclear war, abomination, and it also has a downer ending. I didn't care for. I thought Leo and Jennifer Lawrence's characters they did have arcs, but I thought they were kind of wrapped up. Scenes really happened for their character development was almost like an afterthought, and it's like, okay, we have to put in Melanie Linsky cheating on, and then they're back together. I can't even remember Jennifer Lawrence's character arc. I just feel like what you're watching is Jennifer Lawrence with a wig and Leonardo DiCaprio, who is dedicated to a cause like this. And because there aren't really characters to attach. There aren't really characters to this
to get invested in. I do think, maybe at the end things get reconciled pretty quickly for the characters. Like Leo, his wife takes him back right away. And he is also able to reconcile with Jennifer Lawrence after basically leaving her behind. But at the same time, I just play devil's advocate. It's like, oh, it's the end of the world. So you know what? Like, let's just have this evening. None of this matters anymore. So let's just have one last evening together, which is like the one scene that had the most human element to it. It's like, okay, what would you do if the world was ending? Honestly, that's probably what I would do. Just spend time with family and just try to have one last nice evening together, and then just hold hands as you're about to be blown into dust.
Jonah Hill survived, which I'm still confused. But they were
how?
How? I guess they
just
filmed it on the day.
For the joke.
They filmed it on
just for the joke. His phone still works too, and he's able to post, which I don't know how if all the infrastructure is destroyed. I did
You let him run wild on set, and he's gonna do what he can to, he's gonna get the best laugh.
Honestly, I like Jonah Hill a lot, but anytime a movie wants to have a sort of cynical edge to it, you always see either Jonah Hill or Seth Rogen in there, and those are the de facto guys for that. And props to them for establishing themselves as those go-to actors when you want to add that sort of flair. But again, you see them in those films. Whenever they pop up, you know what they're going to add to the film. And so I wish they weren't so pigeonholed, number one. And number two, I feel like there are other actors you could bring in as well to add that tone.
I know why they had Rob Morgan's character, who was the other scientist. And that's an actor who I'm always delighted. I'm excited to see his character actor star rising. He always improves a movie or television show for me. But if he's supposed to be I don't want to say the Mo of this Larry and Curly, they're all level-headed. They're all kind of in the right. And when when you have a trio that's all in the right, you don't have a straight man. You don't have I kept saying why is this character here to some extent? Either
what does he add?
What does he add? No, he's adding exposition. He's adding we know that a program like this exists, but then he'll go away and then he'll come back. And then he'll go away for a while and he'll come back.
Did they explain why he wasn't spending that last night with his own family? He was spending it with...
Oh, God, no.
See, I always think, doesn't this guy have other people he'd rather spend his last moments with? He's just going to spend it with the main characters? And I didn't really understand that. I also thought that the Timothée Chalamet character was maybe kind of an afterthought. I saw him in the opening credits, right? You see his name there. And then I forgot he was in it. and then they introduce him maybe 2/3 of the way through as this new love interest for Jennifer Lawrence, and I'm like, what is even the point of that? I just, again, I thought he was the character that didn't really add anything, or like what was the point of this character? Why put him in there?
My theory is that someone watched him host SNL and said, this guy's a goofy looking guy. Is he free? And he ended up being free. No, he was a goofy looking guy on that show. You
there's
see,
some
like, standout bits there. But
with Chalamet, I thought it was more just because he's really big right now. He was in Dune.
Too.
He's in all these big things now. He's blowing up as an actor. And so I thought, okay, get him in there. We want all the biggest stars in this movie. You're good. If you're going to cast, DiCaprio, Streep, Lawrence, Hill, you're clearly going for just a swab of A-listers. You even get Ariana Grande in there, who also has been slowly dipping her toes into the acting pool. So, it's a movie that's trying to pride itself on big names. And sometimes, as you see in a lot of big ensemble movies, they throw in an actor for his name or her name without really giving them anything to do.
I think he did well with I think he did well for what his character was, but I don't think he should have. I would have only appreciated him at the grocery store. I thought that made me laugh.
A cameo. I think that would have worked a lot better. Yes. Is just that one scene, him and his friends are anarchists, and it's it's the end of the world. We're not going to pay. Bye. And Jennifer Lawrence is like, yeah, fair. Okay, nice appearance, and you get a bunch of other cameos of people who are doing stuff like that, other one-off reactions of how people are handling the end of the world. That would have been interesting.
I wish this movie was if this movie was going to focus on just Jennifer Lawrence, Leo, you have to make Rob Morgan also a main character, or even more of a main character, and just the people that they meet along the way in terms of don't go back to Streep or Jonah Hill. Don't go back to Cate Blanchett or Tyler Perry. Because, I always thought their introductions were fun. Tyler Perry and Cate Blanchett were funny in the beginning. But I would have... Once again, Adam McKay has done those short cameos with big and B and C-list stars that I'm kind of shocked that they became more than that. I don't know. It would have... if they were going to go on a media tour, this could have been a really star-filled... funny and hard-hitting movie.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, you could have had just all these scenes one-and-done characters, right? Just the one scene with Streep and Hill when they go to the White House and they get a big, they get turned around from there. And then you go on all these shows, you know what I mean? You go through all these different places, and then in each place you meet another big star who has their moment. That could have been a little more interesting.
And it's not about, I mean, you can have your cake and eat it too. It could be about who the cameo is, while also making the scene satirically worth it.
Yeah, make your point about X, then move on to Y.
Now, I know a lot of Hollywood is supporting the Just Look Up movement, but I haven't seen a pin like that.
Yeah, this pin points both up and down. Because I think as a country we need to stop arguing and virtue signaling. Just get along.
That is so refreshing. I think we're all tired of the politics.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why we made Total Devastation. It's for everyone. It's a popcorn movie.
You know what actually was a weird moment I noticed? Because there's a lot of scenes of people on their phones, flipping through TV channels, consuming all this media, da-da-da. There was a moment when someone was watching the Netflix TV show Too Hot to Handle. Did you notice that?
I was on that show. No, so no.
You wish.
Maybe I
picked that up because Eric watches that show, and the little ringing sound of the host's smart device thing, whenever it comes up and yells at the contestants, that sound was made. It was like unmistakable for me. And I was like, that's weird that a Netflix movie would have characters watching a Netflix show. Just, I don't know, a little gripe there from me. I thought it was a little bit of a shameless synergy moment. Like, if this was done, like in the notes you gave me, this was originally like a Paramount project, but Netflix picked it up. Like, if this was an Amazon Prime movie, would there be a scene of someone watching Marvelous Miss Maisel? Like, you know what I mean? Is this in an age of all this selfless self-promotion?
I wonder if the
shameless self-promotion, I should say.
I wonder if it was an Amazon project, how much that Mark Rylance character would have been trimmed down, or at least like shifted. Like, it's like, okay,
that's true.
Make him more of a Musk character than a Bezos.
Take a shot at a different mogul.
I was reading that. I was reading about like Paramount did not make this, right? It was purely a Netflix film,
according to the notes you sent me. So if we're wrong, you're responsible.
Okay, I know. I wanted to. I read that, and I just wanted to say it out loud and confirm it. I really kind of think Paramount in this case. I'm curious if they would have had their notes and it's like, this could be a little, maybe we got to do some reshoots. Like, because, we're putting it out in theaters. I'm curious what that movie would have been like. Because I think Netflix's motto, for better, for worse, is put it out there. Like, half the people who watched The Irishman didn't finish it. We don't care. Put it out there. That's their motto. It's a long motto, but...
I got a sense of that watching this movie. It's like, Adam McKay, do your thing. We have all these stars, and we're doing a lot of very, relevant, relatable touchstones of the state we're living in. So that's enough to get everyone in. Because as you also put in the notes, which again you're responsible for, this immediately became like the third most watched Netflix movie in history. So I can buy that. Although it always seems like every year they're breaking their own records with different TV shows and movies. So I think they're always just gonna keep one-upping themselves.
I'm always curious about the numbers though. Little tiny Netflix rant. They don't release, like, they have their own numbers of like people who did watch the movie, people who stopped watching the movie, how people watch the movie. Like when they say like 80 million people watched this movie over the weekend, that's like a YouTube thing. Like, oh, I clicked on the movie, but I didn't even finish it. But the click still counts.
Yeah, the metric is kind of fuzzy, but up to like, is just pressing play enough to count as a view, or do you have to have watched at least a minute or 2 minutes to count as a view? And then you also have something like called a view through rate, where you basically on average how much the movie was watched, because of all the people who watched it all the way through, other people who just stopped 5 or 10 minutes in and somewhere in between. That's all a bit fuzzy. And
although I'm kind of shocked that, like, I feel like a movie like this, I'm not gonna maybe say this movie particularly, but a movie like if it went with Paramount, even with Adam McKay's name on it, that I think that would have done pretty well. COVID aside, let's take COVID out of the mix. I think it would have done pretty well in theaters because I think Vice did well, Big Short did well. Of course, the comedies did well. I think I know streaming is kind of where we go for our mid-level comedies now, but Adam McKay never struck me as a mid-level comedian or even a mid-level satirist. Like, I think this movie would have done pretty well in theaters.
Oh yeah, I think he's one of those directors now. I mean, not everyone might know offhand that Adam McKay is the director of all those Will Ferrell movies. Like, obviously people who talk about movies a lot would know that. But yeah, his movies were always very watchable, marketable. They're like safe bets. And yeah, if this in a non-COVID world where this is released, probably released around the time other Oscar movies are released, late fall, around the holidays maybe. Big ensemble cast, yeah, probably makes a lot of money. And again, also like a movie that gets a lot of buzz for the topics that are tackled.
Last question I have for you. Were you at all surprised by the score, both scores?
You know, I did think that this would be something skewing higher with audiences than critics, because I think critics are a little more well versed in satire. I think audiences, again, I don't want to say that audiences aren't as smart as critics. I do think that for audiences, if as long as it's funny, because it did have a lot of funny moments in it, I will give it that. They like ensembles, they like actors, they like these a large group of A-listers coming together. But I think for critics, one thing critics really don't like is when a director repeats things they've done before. That is
Okay.
like, and so, yeah, I think the kind of tone he's going for in this movie, he did way better in The Big Short. I thought that was like a much more efficient movie.
Yes.
It was done more economically, if that makes sense. Like, it's a tighter movie. It's sharper, basically. This movie feels too messy, and The Big Short seemed to be like very focused.
Okay. No, wow, that kicks the ass out of my even. Not that I had an answer. I just thought, with all the reasons I was seeing the audience, like, I liked it, but I liked it even though, and I thought critics would be like, this is our first disaster comedy about global warming. We need to talk about this. I was kind of surprised at first to see them go, to see the reviews that I was reading. Although I guess I'm curious to see, and I'll never get data on this, the age group of how people scored. I feel like younger people our age definitely probably rated this higher than Gen Xers and older people.
See, I disagree. I think older people probably like this better than the younger people, because I feel like older people are ones who are more likely to say, oh, like, kids these days always on the phone, obsessed with social media, all these things, and I feel like they would be more likely to like this movie because they probably identify with the perspective more. Whereas younger people, I feel like younger people these days are way more self-aware, and it's way harder to say something satirical or just make a political statement that they don't already know that is a fresh take for them. Because if you try to say something like, oh, like, end of the world, but like whatever, hashtag blah blah blah, young people are gonna be like, yeah, we know we're like that, we know that we'd be prone to this kind of stuff, we get it. So that is
okay. Interesting. Interesting.
There's nothing about, I think a young person would see this, still enjoy it, like a Gen Z person, but they might get annoyed because they might be feeling like they're getting their dad's perspective on things.
Oh, okay. I took it as like this movie's taking, and just from what I read, millennials and younger people's anxiety about this crisis and just kind of using it finding a cathartic way to laugh about it. Like, I could be wrong, but we'll never know. Viewers at home, what do you think?
We could do, I guess, our own research. Nah, that's okay. We'll like use third-party data. But yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it's probably a mix of both of our answers. You know, maybe you're right. Younger people definitely have much more anxiety about climate change and more of the underlying themes of the movie, whereas older people more identify with the tone and the jabs at the youth culture.
Yeah, good times had by all.
But then I think it's a mixed bag for both sides as well. Good times are had by all.
Nothing's better than homemade, right?
This coffee doesn't taste store-bought, is it?
I grind my own beans, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a coffee nut. Serious? Every time you have coffee, you have to grind your beans?
Yeah, Randall is very particular about his coffee.
I can get that way about tea.
The thing of it is we really did have everything, didn't we? I mean, when you think about it.
Okay. All right, so do you want to get into our Our scores. Okay, so what would your percentage score be on Don't Look Up?
Don't Look Up my score. And I think I'm still gonna think that like I watched this movie twice. Once on an initial viewing, and second because I have a podcast about films like this. I don't see myself watching it again, and I think I want to say, or I want to take a guess. No matter what party you belong to, even if you enjoyed the film, I still don't think you're gonna go back and watch it. Prove me wrong. I'm sure there are some people out there that love this film. It's their favorite, and hey, that's great. But I'm going to give it a 50.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. It's not very rewatchable, mostly because the characters are mostly very unlikable, which is common in a satire. You're supposed to be having these caricatures of real life archetypes, and that's the point. But ultimately, I felt like a lot of times this movie was talking down to me. And, I had some laughs for sure. Also got a lot of those signature Adam McKay type of edits, like the hard cut, right? Like the middle of an intense sequence with music and stuff, then cut to something else that's totally different. Like that happened a lot in this movie.
Oh, yeah,
that's
what
I get it.
Yeah, that's what he's known for.
Yeah, the hard cut. I'm feeling a 60%, just because it's serviceable. I think it barely passes, and minus the most points for what it could have been.
And just because we feel the way we do, and I've seen this criticism out there, we're not critiquing the overall themes of this movie, which I think we can both agree on. I think we're critiquing the movie itself and the story structure and everything that goes along with it. That because I've seen the criticism that if you do not like this movie, you are a climate denier, and I'm like, no, that's not. No, that's like I hate. Like, even though this is a political movie, I hate that kind of politics going into a film. Like, it's so. It's so absurd.
I'm never a fan of someone saying, "Oh, because you like or dislike this movie, you must be this sort of person on the political spectrum." I hate that.
A part of me wants to be like, "Oh, if someone liked the movie, a young person liked the movie, you didn't like this because you didn't get it. You're a climate denier." It's like, okay, maybe,
Yeah, for the record, I like the idea of this movie. If you do the elevator pitch, like, oh, what if in this day and age the world is about to end, but you are getting all the same bullcrap you normally do? Like, what would it take for people to get out of their bureaucracy, their phones, their normal day-to-day bullcrap? Not even an asteroid could do that.
The elevator pitch was exciting. When I read it.
I like that idea. It just could be executed better and in a more poignant way.
But yeah.
So I could do the math. It's a 55%. So that means that we are very close. We are actually right spot on with the critics. So on Don't Look Up, we are siding with the critics. You don't often, maybe it's more often than you think, that a movie nominated for Best Picture has a rotten score on Rotten Tomatoes. And not that Rotten Tomatoes is like the end-all be-all, but that is also an interesting disparity. Like, critics themselves are split 50-50 almost, but yet the Academy granted it a nomination.
I'll give this movie some credit. It probably holds more. It's probably been talked about more in the zeitgeist than the other nominees. Like, I don't know anyone. I saw Power of the Dog twice. I don't know anyone talking about Power of the Dog.
I'm a big fan of the new West Side Story personally.
No one's talking about that either, and it was great.
That's true. I mean, there I guess there is something to be said, but I mean, it's easy to get people talking about something when you're talking about the most relevant issues at hand, and you have the biggest stars portraying them. So that it has an advantage just by its own very nature.
Well, it is like, I mean, his other movies have been nominated and won Oscars, but I think the Oscars are upset that, or people are upset that the Oscars didn't nominate No Way Home. So, and they had to rearrange this whole, like, you get to vote in. So that's where the Oscars is at. But
I remember then they almost decided to have like a box office category pre-COVID. They were like best blockbuster category or something to try to be a little more commercial. But it's like, how do you even assess that? Like the most commercially appealing movie?
Look, the Oscar
what
makes
even is that?
Oscars make some stupid decisions, but I don't think trying to do stuff like that is just like, I don't think No Way Home or like, can we be realistic? It's a great film. I enjoyed it, but can we give other movies, smaller movies, a chance? Coda. Go see Coda, people. It was excellent.
That's a fair point. Give other movies their time to shine. Also, we've always said time is the best judge. So just because a movie is the most talked about right now, will Don't Look Up be the most talked about movie of this year 10 years from now? Will people go back to it? Like we said, probably not. There'll probably be other movies from 2021, I should say, that people will go back to and remember more than this, because by its very nature, it is rooted in this. It's like a snapshot, or trying to be, of the current times. Doesn't necessarily age as well or is as relevant down the line. Like you can go back to Step Brothers because it's just like a silly comedy that has broad appeal, right? Like you make another movie, that's just how it goes.
And you can go back to The Big Short in the way you want to rewatch a documentary. That's how,
right. It's like a docudrama, right? And it's tackling issues in that are kind of more universally systemic issues that are still relevant to this day, actually, just because it's an institutional issue they were tackling there. But until then, another great discussion, Keith. And thanks everyone for listening. Look out for more Divided Films soon. And don't look up.